Have you ever felt that strange weight that settles on your shoulders when the calendar turns to a new year? That sensation that everyone around you is celebrating, making grandiose plans, declaring resolutions full of hope, while you stand there, observing everything with a mixture of melancholy and questioning that you can't quite explain. If you're someone who thinks too much, who questions things, who doesn't accept life's ready-made answers, then you know this experience well. The new year for those with restless minds isn't just a date on the calendar. It's a direct confrontation with all the big questions we prefer to avoid during the rest of the year. It's the moment when entire society stops and declares that now, magically, everything can be different, while you, deep down, suspect that maybe nothing really changes, and this leaves you with a feeling of being displaced from the world. Albert Camus, the French-Algerian philosopher, who dedicated his life to understanding the human condition in its rawest and most honest form, would have much to say about this peculiar phenomenon that happens to us with each turn of the year. For Camus, the weight we feel isn't a weakness or character flaw. It's actually a sign that we're awake to the fundamental reality of human existence. While most people surrender to collective rituals of hope and renewal, we, the overthinkers, are face to face with what Camus called the absurd. We're confronting the basic contradiction between our desperate need to find meaning in life and the apparent meaninglessness that the universe offers in response. Think about what really happens during the year's transition. People make endless lists of resolutions, as if it were possible to completely reinvent who they are just because the number on the calendar changed. They talk about starting over, about leaving the past behind, about being a different person from now on. And you, who thinks too much, observe all this with a mixture of envy and skepticism. Part of you would like to be able to believe in this magic, in this possibility of instant transformation. But another part, the part that thinks, that questions, that analyzes, knows that life doesn't work that way. You know that we're basically the same people on January 1st that we were on December 31st. Our wounds are still there, our fears are still there, our behavioral patterns are still there. The only thing that changed was a number. For Camus, this perception isn't cause for despair, though it might seem so at first. It's actually the beginning of true freedom. When we recognize that there's no magic formula for happiness, when we understand that life offers no guarantees or ready-made meanings, when we accept that the universe is fundamentally indifferent to our desires and dreams, something interesting happens. We stop looking for external salvation. We stop waiting for some event, date, or circumstance to automatically transform us, and we begin to take total responsibility for our existence. Not because we have to do this, but because we choose to do this. And in this choice, in this conscious acceptance of our condition, we find a peculiar form of dignity. The weight you feel during the new year is largely the weight of consciousness. While others can distract themselves with the party, with the fireworks, with empty promises of change, you're experiencing what Camus described as the nausea of repetition. You see that the same cycles repeat year after year. The same promises are made and broken. The same hopes are created and frustrated. The same illusions are built and crumbled. And you, who thinks too much, can't simply ignore these patterns. Your mind, this mind that questions everything, forces you to see the reality behind collective fantasies. And this reality, it must be admitted, can be heavy to carry. But here's the crucial point that Camus offers us. Recognizing the absurd of existence doesn't mean giving up on life. On the contrary, it means embracing life with even more intensity, precisely because it doesn't have a predetermined meaning. When you realize there's no cosmic script you need to follow, when you understand there's no universal authority dictating how you should live, when you accept that each moment is fundamentally unique and unrepeatable, you become free to create your own values, your own meanings, your own way of being in the world. The new year, seen from this perspective, isn't an opportunity to become someone different. It's an opportunity to become more fully who you already are. Think about the social pressure that exists around New Year's resolutions. Everyone needs to have a goal, a plan, a vision of the future. Everyone needs to be optimistic, hopeful, full of energy for the changes to come. And if you don't feel that, and if honestly you look at the coming year and see more of the same, society makes you feel like there's something wrong with you, like you're pessimistic, negative, problematic. But Camus teaches us that this absence of grandiose expectations can actually be a form of wisdom. When we don't expect life to deliver happiness on a silver platter, when we don't create unrealistic expectations about the future, when we don't invest our peace of mind in external circumstances, we paradoxically become more capable of finding satisfaction in the present. The person who thinks too much frequently feels like a stranger in their own culture, especially during times of collective celebration like the New Year. You observe people around you apparently able to surrender completely to the moment, to genuinely believe that this time will be different, to deposit all their hope in promises that are, fundamentally, impossible to keep. And you can't do that. Your analytical mind, your tendency to question, your resistance to accepting simple answers to complex questions, all of this puts you in a position of critical observer of the very reality you inhabit. This can be lonely, can be heavy, can even be painful. But it can also be liberating if you know how to interpret this experience. Camus wrote about the myth of Sisyphus, condemned by the gods to roll a stone up a mountain for all eternity, only to see it roll back down and have to start all over again. For many people, this is an image of absolute despair. But Camus proposes a different interpretation. He suggests we must imagine Sisyphus happy. Why? Because Sisyphus, conscious of his condition, chooses to embrace it. He doesn't wait for the gods to change their minds. He doesn't waste time lamenting his fate. He simply accepts that rolling the stone is his reality and finds satisfaction in the very act of rolling the stone. His happiness doesn't depend on reaching the top of the mountain and staying there. His happiness is in the process, in the movement, in the conscious acceptance of his condition. The New Year, for those who think too much, can seem exactly like the moment when Sisyphus sees his stone roll back to the foot of the mountain. Another year has gone by, and here we are again, essentially in the same place, facing the same fundamental challenges, carrying the same existential weights. The difference is that while most people can temporarily delude themselves with the fantasy that this time everything will be different, you, who thinks too much, see the situation with brutal clarity. And this clarity, though it may be uncomfortable, is also a form of power. Because when you see reality as it really is, you can begin to work with it genuinely, instead of fighting against it or trying to escape from it. Perhaps the weight you feel during the New Year is, in part, the weight of responsibility. When you recognize that there are no magic solutions, when you understand that no one is coming to save you, when you accept that you are the only one responsible for giving meaning and direction to your life, this can be frightening. It's much more comfortable to believe that there's a greater plan, that things happen for a reason, that if you follow the right rules and make the right choices, life will reward you with happiness. But you, who thinks too much, suspect that things don't work that way. You see that good people suffer, that bad people prosper, that the universe is fundamentally indifferent to our concepts of justice and deserving. And this puts you in a position where you need to create your own values, define your own criteria for success, build your own philosophy of life. This is heavy work, literally and figuratively. Now I have a question for you, and I want you to really stop and think before answering. In the comments, tell me, what was the moment when you realized that maybe life's easy answers don't work for you? That moment when you realized that your mind simply can't accept simplified explanations or ready-made solutions. Maybe it was during a New Year's celebration. Maybe it was in a completely different context. But I bet there was a specific moment when you thought something like, wait, this doesn't make sense to me. Write down there, I also think too much, and tell us what that moment was for you. Because look, you're definitely not alone in this. There are many of us here who feel this same weight, who ask these same questions, who can't simply accept the ready-made answers that the world offers. And when you share your experience, you're helping other people feel less alone too. Your response might be exactly what someone needs to read today, to realize that there's nothing wrong with thinking too much, with questioning, with feeling displaced sometimes. Camus' genius lies in recognizing that confronting the absurd, though painful, is also the beginning of authenticity. When we stop looking for external meanings, when we stop expecting life to conform to our expectations, when we accept that we are fundamentally responsible for our own experience, something interesting happens. We begin to live more consciously, more deliberately, more presently. Each choice becomes meaningful not because it fits into a greater plan, but precisely because it doesn't fit. Each moment becomes precious not because it's part of a cosmic narrative, but because it's unique, unrepeatable, and completely ours. For the person who thinks too much, the new year can be an opportunity to practice what Camus called revolt. Not revolt in the sense of anger or destructive rebellion, but revolt in the sense of refusing to accept the comfortable illusions that society offers. Revolt against the idea that we need to always be optimistic, always hopeful, always working towards some future goal that will bring us happiness. Revolt against the pressure to make resolutions we know we won't keep, to pretend we believe in changes we know are superficial, to participate in collective rituals that don't make sense to us. This revolt isn't bitterness, it's clarity. It's the refusal to live a life based on comfortable lies, even if those lies are socially accepted and even encouraged. There's a particular loneliness in being someone who thinks too much during times of collective celebration. You see people around you able to surrender completely to the moment, apparently capable of suspending their skepticism, of embracing hope without reservations, of genuinely believing that this time things will be different. And part of you envies this capacity. It would be easier to be able to simply throw yourself into the current, accept the ready-made narratives, believe in promises of instant transformation. But your mind doesn't allow this. Your questioning nature, your resistance to accepting simple answers, your tendency to analyze everything deeply, all of this keeps you on the outside of celebrations, observing with a mixture of fascination and melancholy. But here's something Camus teaches us. This position of observer isn't necessarily a position of inferiority. When you're on the outside looking in, you see things that those who are totally immersed in the experience can't see. You perceive the patterns, the contradictions, the illusions that sustain collective rituals. You understand that people's desperate need to believe that this year will be different is, in itself, a confession that all previous years were, somehow, unsatisfactory. And this gives you a unique perspective on the human condition, a deeper understanding of what really motivates people, of what are the fundamental fears and desires that drive human behavior. The pressure of the new year on those who think too much also has to do with time. Our society is obsessed with temporal milestones, with the idea that certain dates have magical power of transformation. January 1st, birthdays, Mondays, beginning of the month, everything becomes an opportunity to start over, to turn the page, to begin again. But you, who thinks deeply about things, know that time doesn't work that way. You know that we are continuous beings, that our personality, our habits, our thought patterns don't magically restart because a date changed. You know that real change, when it happens, is gradual, complex, multifaceted, and rarely coincides with arbitrary milestones on the calendar. This awareness can make you feel like you're living at a different rhythm from the rest of the world, like you know something about the nature of time that others don't know or prefer to ignore. Camus speaks to us about the importance of living in the present, but not in the superficial sense that popular culture often promotes. It's not about enjoying the moment in the hedonistic sense, or thinking positive in the sense of denying reality. It's about conscious and deliberate presence, total acceptance of what is, including what is difficult, painful, or absurd. When you, who thinks too much, feel the weight of the new year, maybe what you're feeling is the pressure of being totally present in your own life, without the comfortable distractions of collective illusions. And this is intense. This is heavy. This requires courage, because it means facing reality without filters, without anesthesia, without the pious lies that make life easier to bear. The person who thinks too much frequently finds themselves confronted with questions that others manage to avoid or postpone indefinitely. During the new year, while most are focused on future goals and hopes for change, you might be struggling with more fundamental questions. What's really the point of all this? Why do we keep doing the same things expecting different results? How do we find satisfaction in a life that is fundamentally repetitive and limited? These are heavy questions, questions that don't have easy or comforting answers. But they're also important questions, questions that, when explored honestly, can lead to a more authentic and conscious way of life. If you've made it this far, if these reflections make sense to you, if you recognize yourself in this description of the experience of those who think too much, then maybe you want to continue this journey with us. I created this channel exactly for people like you, people who aren't satisfied with superficial answers, who ask difficult questions, who sometimes feel displaced in a world that seems to value simplicity above truth. If you subscribe here, you'll find a space where it's safe to question, where depth of thought is valued, where your existential concerns aren't seen as problems to be solved, but as valuable characteristics to be explored. It's not a place where I'll promise you easy solutions or magic formulas for happiness. It's a place where we'll explore together the great questions of human existence, with honesty, with courage, and with the kind of intellectual curiosity that only those who think too much can truly appreciate. Returning to the specific weight that the new year carries for restless minds, there's also the issue of comparisons. During this time, we're bombarded with social media posts showing the year's achievements, grandiose plans for the next year, the spectacular transformations that people claim to have experienced. And you, who analyzes everything, perceive the artificiality behind much of this. You perceive that people are performing happiness and success more than genuinely experiencing these things. You perceive that there's enormous social pressure to present your life as a narrative of constant progress, when reality is much more complex, much more contradictory, much more messy than that. This perception can make you feel even more isolated because you can't participate in this collective performance of optimism and achievement. Your intellectual honesty doesn't allow you to simplify your experience this way. The concept of progress, so central to New Year celebrations, is particularly problematic for those who think deeply. The idea that we're always improving, always evolving, always moving toward a better version of ourselves is comforting, but you suspect it's also illusory. Your experience has taught you that life is more cyclical than linear, that the same problems tend to reappear in different forms, that what we think we've overcome comes back to challenge us in unexpected ways. This doesn't mean you're pessimistic. It means you're realistic. You understand that human growth doesn't happen in a straight line, that wisdom isn't accumulative in the way our culture likes to imagine, that we are complex and contradictory beings who can't be reduced to simple narratives of progress. Camus had a complicated relationship with hope. He saw hope as potentially dangerous when used to avoid confronting present reality. When we hope that the future will bring us what the present doesn't offer, when we deposit our capacity for satisfaction in circumstances that don't yet exist, we are, in a way, refusing to fully live the life we have now. For the person who thinks too much, this tendency to always live in the future during the new year can be especially frustrating. You see people making elaborate plans, creating grandiose expectations, investing emotionally in possibilities that may or may not materialize, and you wonder, but what about now? And this moment? And this reality we're living in this exact instant? Why isn't it enough? Why do we always need something more, something different, something future? The existential anguish you might feel during the new year isn't a bug in the system. It's a feature. It's your mind functioning exactly as it should function in a universe that offers no guarantees or ready-made meanings. It's your consciousness operating at full capacity without the psychological defense mechanisms that many people use to avoid confronting the most fundamental questions of existence. This anguish is paradoxically a sign of mental health, not mental problems. It's evidence that you're not sleeping through your own life, not settling for superficial explanations, not allowing others to define for you what should be important or valuable. There's also the question of authenticity versus social conformity. During the new year, there's implicit pressure to participate in collective rituals, to express optimism you might not feel, to make plans that might not make sense to you, to celebrate in ways that might leave you empty inside. And you, who values intellectual honesty above social comfort, find yourself in a difficult position. Participating in the collective performance means betraying your own perceptions. But refusing to participate means isolating yourself even more, means accepting the position of external observer that is already often lonely and heavy. There are no easy solutions to this dilemma. Camus suggested that authenticity, though difficult, is always preferable to false conformity, because at least in authenticity we maintain our integrity as thinking beings. The relationship between thinking too much and feeling too much also intensifies during the new year. When your mind is hyperactive, analyzing everything, questioning everything, inevitably your emotions also intensify. You don't just feel sadness, you feel existential melancholy. You don't just feel anxiety. You feel anguish about the nature of existence. You don't just feel loneliness, you feel alienation from the human condition. These intensified emotions can be overwhelming, especially when you're surrounded by people who seem to navigate life with much more lightness and simplicity. But Camus would remind us that emotional intensity can also be a form of vitality, proof that you're fully alive, fully present, fully engaged with the reality of being human in an incomprehensible universe. In the end, the weight you feel during the new year can be interpreted as an invitation to fully embrace your questioning nature, your refusal to accept easy answers, your insistence on thinking deeply about things that others prefer to ignore. This weight is the price of consciousness, but it's also the portal to a more authentic and deliberate way of life. When you accept that there are no magic formulas, that life offers no guarantees, that you are fundamentally responsible for creating meaning and direction in your own existence, you become free to live according to your own values, your own criteria, your own vision of what's worthwhile. The new year, seen through Camus' lens, doesn't need to be about radical transformation or forced optimism. It can be about conscious acceptance, about fully embracing who you are, including your tendency to think too much, your resistance to simple answers, your need to question everything. It can be about recognizing that your way of experiencing the world, though sometimes heavy and lonely, is also valuable, necessary, and profoundly human. You don't need to apologize for thinking too much. You don't need to try to be simpler, more optimistic, more like people who seem to navigate life with more ease. You do need to learn to find satisfaction and even joy in the very complexity of your experience, in the richness of your inner life, in the depth of your capacity for reflection and questioning. This isn't burden, it's gift, it's responsibility, it's freedom.